My name is Brent Boyer. I'm a divorce attorney, practice here in Metro Detroit in Michigan, and we'll go over the top 10 things that men frequently want to ask, what they want to find out from their divorce attorney. So number one question that we'll get is, well, am I going to lose everything? Will I lose everything in my divorce? That's the number one question. So you're definitely not going to lose everything in your divorce. There's kind of different ways to look at this. One way to look at this is it's a partnership, just like a business partnership. You own half of everything, your wife owns half of everything. Now there's exceptions to that. So if you're in a longer term marriage, let's say 15, 20, 25 years long that you're married, the likelihood at that point is most of what you have, most of what you've acquired is from during your marriage. So everything that you've acquired during the marriage, that you accumulated during the marriage, you earned it during the marriage, bought the house during the marriage, bought a car during the marriage, maybe that's paid off, has value, investments, retirement accounts, savings, whatever it might be, all that property, all the things that are in your name, all the things that have value are from during the marriage, and therefore you own all those things jointly. Now there could be exceptions. There might be something that, for example, that you inherited. Maybe you inherited some property and kept it separate and it's in your separate name. You could then keep that separate during your divorce. Or there might be a gift. Let's say your parents gave you something and you kept it in your separate name. They didn't give it to both you and your spouse. And now you're getting divorced. You might be able to keep a gift or an inheritance separate. Or there might even be something you owned prior to the marriage, even after all these years, that you've kept separate. You had a house that you owned before the marriage that you still have. You use it as a rental property. That might be a separate property then, depending on what kind of money went into it during the marriage. But in general, you're not going to lose everything. You might lose half of everything. That's certainly possible, depending on how long you've been married. Now, if you're in a shorter term marriage, it's a different set of rules. At that point, the assumption might be, well, I'm going to keep everything that I had coming into the marriage, and my spouse is going to keep everything that they had coming into the marriage, because we've only been married a couple years. Now, there might not be a prenuptial agreement. I know people don't do prenups that often. They're valid, they're enforceable in the state of Michigan. They're certainly something that you could be doing and should be doing, and if you're getting married later in life, you would definitely want to do a prenuptial agreement. But people don't do them. And then they go to get divorced a couple years after a marriage. They're in a very short-term kind of a marriage situation, and they're trying to sort things out, but they still have some advantages at that point of the idea of separate property versus marital property. Separate property, in that case, being property owned before you got married. So you own a house before you get married. You still own the house 3 years later. Now you're getting divorced. It's your house. It's not really something that your wife is going to get half of or your spouse will get half of necessarily. They might have a claim against the money that went into this house during the marriage or other things that maybe you did to the house. But in general, the assumption is it's your house as opposed to the assumption being it's a house to be shared between the two of you. So this first question, will I lose everything in the divorce? You're not going to lose everything in the divorce. At the most, you'd lose half of what you have, and then there's exceptions from there. So number two on this list of top 10 questions, number two, how much alimony will I have to pay and for how long? So we get this question a lot. If you're married long enough where alimony can be an issue, how long is long enough? More than a few years, more than 5 years. You start getting into 20, 25-year marriage, or spousal support as it's also called, is definitely an issue here in Metro Detroit in Michigan where I practice law. Spousal support or alimony certainly is something that's possible. It's certainly valid. It's something that people are forced to pay if they end up doing a trial and a court makes a decision, or if they reach an agreement, they agree on paying some spousal support or alimony if the circumstances justify it. So what's going to justify it? Primarily it's a difference in income. The bigger the disparity in the incomes, the more likely that you would be paying some spousal support or alimony. You got to be married long enough. There's no minimum. There's no law that says how long you got to be married for alimony or spousal support to be valid. But you start looking at longer than a 5-year marriage and a big difference in income, and you could be in trouble at that point. You might have to be paying some spousal support or alimony. So at that point, how is that calculated? Well, it's based on 12 different factors, but the biggest thing that affects alimony or spousal support is the disparity in income. If you're making $200,000 a year and your wife makes or spouse makes very little, maybe 0 or 30 or 40 or something, you're in an alimony or spousal support kind of situation at that point. Now, if you have minor children and you're getting divorced, child support has to be calculated first. But putting aside children and child support and those kind of issues, if you're in a situation where you make considerable amount of money, you're making times as much as your spouse does, or even twice as much as your spouse does. You could be in a situation where you'd have to pay spousal support. You also look at what are the expenses, what are your monthly bills, what are your spouse's monthly bills, how old are they, what's their health, what's their education, ability to work if they're not working, or ability to make more than they're making if they're not making much, if they're under earning. But in general, spousal support alimony is a possibility. It's alive and well, and it could be something that you end up having to pay in a divorce. Number 3 in our list of top 10 questions that men have for divorce attorneys. Number 3, what are my chances of getting joint or full custody of my children? So custody is a common question. We get this one a lot. What's the chances of you getting full custody or joint custody of your kids? The chances are good under normal situation, normal circumstances kind of a thing. If you're living together, both parents are working, both parents are involved with raising the children and dealing with the day-to-day things with their children, you have just as much of a right to get shared custody as your spouse does, or in this case, if it's men, as you have just as much right as your wife does. There's nothing saying that women get custody and men don't. That's definitely not how the law is. So you look at the best interest of the child factors. There's these 12 factors they look at, but really what we're talking about is you're reaching some kind of an agreement between the two of you. If you're looking for shared custody, you want joint custody of the children, then you need to be working towards doing that. Agreeing to have your wife or spouse get full custody and all you have is every other weekend, obviously then that's what you're going to get. Or, not really pursuing that or making it known that you'd be willing to give in and your wife can just have full custody of the children. Most of the people that we meet with that ended up with only every other weekend and they don't have more time than that with their children, it's because they agreed to it. They might have felt bullied into it or pushed into it or like they didn't have a choice. It's not usually at a trial where a judge just says, yeah, wife gets 80% of the time with the kids and husband's only going to get 20% of the time. They don't usually do that. I mean, if both parents have the ability, as in the work schedule allows it, and they're involved in their kids' lives and they're active in their children's lives, and there's no concerns like, alcoholism or drug abuse or domestic violence or craziness like that, if those things aren't a factor, there should be some sort of shared custody. Why wouldn't there be? Somewhere between every other weekend and half the time is what anyone should reasonably be expecting, the way things are, the way divorce cases go today. Number 4 in our list of top 10 questions for the men have for divorce attorneys. Number 4, do I have to move out of the house right now? So there's nothing requiring you to move out. As long as there's not domestic violence or the police being called, no reason to move out. A lot of reasons to stay put, actually. Potentially you'd want to stay living together, especially if you have minor children. Nothing requiring you to move. Moving out can cause a lot of issues if you have children. It can create concerns with custody, parenting time. You move out and now you don't know when you're going to see your children, or the spouse, your wife, is playing games about it or trying to change the locks, won't let you back in your house. So a lot of reasons not to just move out for no reason. Just because you have a dispute, get into a fight or some kind of disagreement doesn't mean you should just move out. Now you could leave for the night or leave for the week or leave for any amount of time, but you really need to be living together, so to speak, if you have children. If you don't have children, it doesn't really matter. Move out, stay there. None of that hurts anything. There's no such thing as abandonment. I know a lot of people ask about that word, like it's got some, that's not a thing. Moving out doesn't mean you're giving up your right to the house or giving up your right to the kids, but it could mean you're gonna have a lot harder time seeing the kids if you have minor children. So that's number 4 on our list here of top 10 questions that men usually have for divorce attorneys. Number 5, can I protect my business, retirement, or inheritance? So number 5 is, how do I protect my assets in the case of a divorce? Can I protect my business if I'm the business owner? Can I protect my retirement account? Can I protect inheritance? So inheritance you can. If you've inherited money, you received money from mom or dad or whoever that passed away and left you some money, and you kept it in a separate account in your name only, you have the ability to protect that inheritance come time for a divorce. Can you protect a business if you're a business owner? Not really. If you're the sole owner of the business, you own it, you're in a separate kind of business partnership type of thing with your spouse, with your wife, because you're married. So the two of you own the business, even though you're the only one on the business, it's only in your name. If you started the business during the marriage or purchased the business during the marriage, chances are you and your spouse each own half of that, and you're gonna have to figure out some sort of buyout in your divorce case. Doesn't matter that your wife's not on the business, doesn't matter that she doesn't run it, she doesn't work there, she has nothing to do with it. That doesn't mean you can just protect it. Retirement accounts, same deal. Retirement accounts are only in one person's name. That's how they are. That doesn't mean that the other person doesn't have a claim against it in a divorce. If you're married long enough you acquired that retirement during your divorce, then you could assume that that's half yours, half your spouse's. Half of it belongs to your wife in a divorce case, even though it's a retirement account in your name only, which, I mean, goes without saying, you're the one that earned it. Number 6 on this list of top 10 questions. Number 6, what will this cost me financially and emotionally? What is a divorce going to cost me financially and emotionally? So financially, hard to say. I mean, the way we do things here, we do a retainer, so you pay some money up front, we use it towards the work, but it's not really a quote of total cost. Hard to really pin down a cost. I think an average cost on a divorce, the statistics that I see, things that I see with divorces in Michigan and kids and no kids, there's an average of $5,000 to $10,000 probably as a total. Divorces can be less than that, and they can be more. It kind of just depends on the situation. So the financial cost is hard to say. Emotional cost depends on your situation, right? If you have children together, if you don't have children together, it can become pretty emotionally exhausting. You want to do it the right way, get it over with as soon as you can, treat it, get proper advice and go through it the right way. You don't want this divorce case wearing you out and ruining your life, which sometimes they feel like they could do. So that's number 6 on our list of top 10 questions. Number 7, can I stop her from taking the kids out of the state or out of the country? So a divorce is coming, or maybe a divorce is already filed. Am I able to stop my wife or my spouse from taking the kids? Well, you can. If a divorce has already been filed, you can definitely put a stop to that. Part of what we would do when we file a divorce case, one of the first things we do, get a court order signed without a hearing, what's called an ex parte order for custody and parenting time. And part of that would be neither one of you are allowed to move more than 100 miles away. Neither one of you are allowed to move out of state based on joint legal custody rules, the way Michigan does things. So you definitely can prevent someone from taking the kids out of the state or out of the country. If there's no divorce case filed yet, it can be harder to do. They're not really breaking any laws by leaving the country or leaving the state and taking the children. If it's the mother or the child, no one's going to question them leaving Michigan and going to Georgia or something. Like they're allowed to do that. No law's been violated. So you want to get ahead of it. If you sense trouble is coming, you want to get ahead of it. Get something filed. Filing first has its advantages as well. Number 8 on this list of top 10 questions that men typically have for divorce lawyers is what if she's cheating? Does this matter legally? So how does adultery affect my divorce case is a question that men often have. So adultery is going to have a pretty small effect normally. Unfortunately, the way Michigan law is, we're a no-fault state, which means you don't need a reason to get divorced. But then that means the reasons for getting divorced just don't carry that much weight. I can't say that it's zero and it affects nothing, but in general, adultery, one of the parties is cheating, is really not going to directly affect the outcome of your divorce case. You're still going to reach an agreement, split things up equally, figure out what you're doing with custody, parenting time, property division, whatever it might be. It's not going to be the be-all, end-all of somebody where they get nothing just because they were caught cheating or committing adultery. It won't be the case. Number 9 in our list of top 10 questions that men ask of divorce attorneys is, how do I avoid false accusations or being taken advantage of? So the false accusations thing, which is really the same kind of category as this being taken advantage of concept. False accusations, how do you avoid this? So if you and your wife are living together, you may need to look at moving out temporarily or staying away or push and record on your phone. We all have a recording device in our pocket these days, right? If you think there's trouble, if your wife is making or spouse is making threats, they're saying they're gonna contact the police and make false allegations about you, start recording. Record what's been said. They're not allowed to do that. It's a felony to falsely accuse you of something like that. So that's one way to avoid things. The other is to just try to keep the peace, keep things worked out, get advice early on. That can avoid false accusations. It can avoid a lot of nonsense in your divorce situation, avoid problems in the first place. Number 10 on this list of top 10 questions that men have for divorce lawyers, what should I do right now to protect myself? Well, one of the things you can do to protect yourself, your strategy, look, we can't give advice about how to hide assets or keep them from your wife and spouse or prevent her from getting access to certain things, or somebody's saying I'm gonna sell my car to my brother for $1, whatever nonsense, whatever kind of foolishness, trickery, silly things. If it sounds like it's probably illegal or quasi-criminal, it is. It's just gonna make you look like the bad person. But what can you do as far as strategy? Get advice early on. Meet with a divorce lawyer early on. That's one thing you can do. You can also be the first to file. Filing first has a lot of advantages for divorce. I put that out there on the internet. People always try to debate it. But think about it. What possibly would not be an advantage to filing first? It's a lawsuit. I'd rather be filing a lawsuit than having somebody suing me and I've got to respond to it. I could be the one to plan it. I can be the one to put the words on paper, get court orders signed without a hearing, decide the timing, decide when I want the other person served. So that's all ways to kind of protect yourself right now. Like today, what could I be doing? That's all a good plan too. So hopefully those have helped. That's our top 10 questions that men have of divorce lawyers. Thanks.